The sun, a fiery orb, was just peeking over the distant, jagged peaks of the Sierra Madre, painting the vast, cloudless sky in hues of soft rose and brilliant orange. A gentle breeze, cool from the night, whispered through the rows of corn, making the stalks rustle like 1,000 hushed voices sharing an ancient secret. It was the smell of a new day, they say, a fresh start, a clean slate. But for Paloma, every sunrise brought with it the bitter, metallic taste of a past that refused to fade, a ghost that clung to her with the tenacity of the morning mist in the valleys. For months, the dawn had not been a promise, but a recurring accusation. She stood by the rough-hewn wooden fence that bordered their small plot of land, her hands, calloused and mapped with the lines of years tending the earth, clutching the worn, familiar fabric of her rebozo. The scent of damp soil, rich and loamy, mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of fresh tortillas cooking on the comal, a cruel olfactory reminder of a life that once was, a life filled with simple joys and shared dreams, dreams of a second room for the house, of sending Itzel to a proper school, of growing old together watching the seasons turn. Now, those dreams felt like ashes in her mouth. The life they represented had been brutally and unceremoniously ripped from her hands, thread by painful thread. Inside the small, humble farmhouse, a structure of adobe and wood that had witnessed generations of births, deaths, and quiet living, a sound shattered the fragile peace of the morning. It was not the gentle coo of a waking child or the familiar clatter of morning chores. It was a child's cry, sharp and piercing, a sound of pure terror that sliced through the air, followed by the unmistakable, sickening crash of pottery shattering against a hard surface. Paloma's heart, a frantic drum of dread, pounded against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage of bone. She knew this sound, or rather, the rage that produced it. It had been building for months, a low thunder in Osvaldo's voice, a darkness in his eyes when he returned from town, the way he would look at their simple home with contempt. In the deepest, most shadowed corners of her soul, she knew what this final, explosive sound meant. The fragile peace had been a lie, a temporary ceasefire, in a war she hadn't realized she was losing so badly. She walked, her feet leaden, through the creaking wooden door, the familiar scent of masa and wood smoke, usually a source of comfort, now filling her nostrils with the cloying aroma of an impending end. The kitchen, which had always been her sanctuary, a place of warmth, laughter, and the alchemy of turning simple ingredients into love, was a battlefield. Shards of broken clay pots, the ones her own grandmother had made, the ones she'd carried to this home as a bride, lay scattered across the packed dirt floor like fallen soldiers, a brutal testament to a rage that had boiled over and consumed everything in its path. And there, in the center of the chaos, a dark sun in a shattered universe, stood Osvaldo, her husband. His face, once handsome and quick to smile, was contorted into a mask of cruel, chilling indifference. His eyes, the same eyes that once held pools of tenderness where she saw her own reflection, were now cold, hard stones, devoid of any light or warmth. "What is the meaning of this, Osvaldo?" Paloma's voice, though trembling with a mix of fear and rising fury, held a surprising strength, a core of steel she didn't know she possessed. She fought to keep her hands from shaking, balling them into fists at her sides, trying to project an image of strength for the sake of the little girl, her daughter, Itzel, who was cowering in the corner, her small, frail body shaking with sobs of fear, her face buried in her hands. Osvaldo let out a harsh, guttural laugh, a sound that held no humor, only a deep, curdled scorn. "Meaning? The meaning, my dear, long-suffering Paloma, is that I am done, finished, kaput." He gestured dismissively around the small, sparse room, his hand sweeping across the strings of dried chilies, the simple wooden table, the life they had built from dust and hope. "Done with this suffocating poverty, this hand-to-mouth life, done with you." He took a step closer, his shadow falling over her like a shroud. "I told you, didn't I? I told you I needed more, that I was meant for more than calluses and dirt under my nails. And you, with your endless, pious talk of hard work and patience. You gave me nothing but empty platitudes and emptier promises. A cold, creeping dread, slick and venomous, seeped into Paloma's bones, chilling her to the marrow. But what about Itzel? What about our dreams? We built this farm from nothing, Osvaldo. We poured our sweat and our youth into this soil. We built this life together. He scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips into something ugly and unfamiliar. Dreams. This is a nightmare, Paloma. A nightmare of dirt, debt, and endless, back-breaking struggle. I found something better. Someone better. He reached into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out a thick wad of bills, fanning them mockingly in front of her face. The crisp paper, a symbol of their future, of Itzel's education, now looked obscene in his hand. This is the future, Paloma. This and the woman who knows how to get it. Not your worn-out fields and your endless, soul-crushing chores. Her eyes widened in horror, the realization dawning with the force of a physical blow. That's the money for the harvest, the money we saved for Itzel's schooling. How could you, Osvaldo? How could you steal from your own family, from your own child? He shrugged, a chilling, terrifying nonchalance in his movements. Consider it a severance package, a small token for the wasted years I spent here, playing the dutiful peasant. He took another step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that curled in the air between them. And as for Itzel, she's your burden now, Paloma. Your cross to bear. Not mine, I'm leaving. And I'm taking everything that matters. He meant the money, but his words implied so much more. He turned, his boots grinding the broken pottery shards further into the dirt floor, and walked towards the door, his steps echoing hollowly in the stunned, ringing silence. Paloma's mind reeled, a chaotic storm of disbelief and agony. This couldn't be happening, not like this, not after everything she had given, everything she had sacrificed. Osvaldo, please. She cried out, her voice finally cracking, the sound of her own heart breaking. Don't do this. Please think of our daughter. She needs her father. He paused at the threshold, his hand on the rough wood of the doorframe. He didn't turn around. His back was a rigid wall of denial. She'll learn, Paloma, he said, his voice flat and final. She'll learn that some people are meant for more than this dust. And with that, he was gone. The door slammed shut, the sound a final, brutal punctuation mark on the end of their life together, a gunshot in the quiet morning. Paloma stood frozen, the broken pottery at her feet a perfect mirror for the shattered pieces of her heart. The silence in the room was a physical presence, deafening and vast, broken only by the soft, terrified whimpers of Itzel in the corner. Paloma slowly turned and looked at her daughter, her small, innocent face streaked with tears and dirt, and a fierce, primal instinct, hot as magma, ignited within her. He would not break them. He would not be the end of their story. She would not let him. The sun had long set, leaving behind a bruised, purple sky that bled into the inky blackness of night. Long, eerie shadows stretched like skeletal fingers across the desolate, arid landscape. Osvaldo had driven her and Itzel for hours, deep into the arid heart of the countryside, to the edge of nowhere. He stopped at a forgotten ranch, a place that time itself seemed to have abandoned. The small adobe house, its roof sagging like a tired old man's shoulders, its windows boarded up or smashed, looked like a skull against the bruised twilight. He had left them with a single, worn, threadbare blanket, a half-empty sack of cornmeal, and the cruel parting words, "This is all you'll get from me. Don't even think about coming to look for me." Paloma had watched his truck disappear in a swirling cloud of dust and indifference, a bitter, acidic taste filling her mouth. She had held Itzel close, the child's small body trembling against hers, trying to absorb the shivers of fear and cold that racked her frame. The silence that followed his departure was suffocating, a heavy blanket of nothingness, punctuated only by the mournful, lonely howl of a distant coyote. The first night in the abandoned ranch was a descent into a living nightmare. The roof, riddled with holes, dripped incessantly with the night's dew, each drop a cold, mocking reminder of their exposure, creating slimy puddles on the packed dirt floor. There was no electricity, no running water, not even a candle. The air was thick and stagnant, heavy with the smell of dust, decay, and the faint, unsettling scent of animal droppings. Every creak of the old house's tired bones, every rustle of unseen things in the walls or outside in the thorny scrub, sent shivers of pure terror down Paloma's spine. She huddled with Itzel in a corner, wrapping the thin, useless blanket tightly around their two bodies, a futile gesture against the biting cold and the overwhelming, crushing despair that threatened to consume her. Itzel, exhausted from hours of crying, had finally fallen into a fitful sleep, her small hand still clutching a fistful of Paloma's shirt as if it were her only anchor in a storm. But Paloma couldn't sleep. Her mind raced, a frantic, chaotic whirlwind of fear, rage, and desperation. How would they survive? They had nothing, less than nothing. No money, no food to speak of, and no one in this godforsaken wasteland even knew they existed. The vast, empty, silent land around them seemed to mock her, a stark and brutal symbol of her own emptiness and isolation. A large rat, emboldened by the stillness, scurried across the floor, its beady black eyes glinting in the faint sliver of moonlight that filtered through a crack in a boarded-up window. Paloma flinched, a wave of revulsion and nausea washing over her. This was it. This was the bottom of the abyss. She felt a profound sense of hopelessness, a darkness so deep and total it threatened to swallow her whole, to extinguish the last flickering ember of her spirit. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she allowed herself to wish for the end. As the first weak rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in pale, watery colors, promising a day she did not want to face, Paloma's tired eyes fell upon a small, leather-bound book tucked away in a dusty, cobweb-filled corner. It was an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the faded, elegant script on the cover. It was her grandmother's journal, a treasure she had thought lost. She tucked it into their belongings months ago, meaning to read it but had forgotten. It was filled with recipes, remedies, agricultural folklore, and detailed observations about the land and its secrets. As she carefully turned the delicate pages, a tiny spark, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity, ignited within the cold darkness of her chest. It was a whisper of hope, a faint but persistent echo of the strength, resilience, and wisdom that ran in her family's veins, a legacy of women who had faced down hardship and survived. The next day, Paloma woke not with despair, but with a new, fragile resolve, a fierce determination burning in her heart like a low, steady flame. She couldn't give up. She wouldn't, not for Itzel. She remembered her grandmother's words, written in that journal in a steady, confident hand. The earth provides, Mija, always, but you must be willing to listen, and you must be willing to work. Her first, most urgent task was to find water. Following an instinct she didn't know she had, guided by the memory of her grandmother's notes on how certain plants cluster near underground springs, she spent hours searching the parched landscape, her throat raw, her muscles screaming in protest. Finally, she stumbled upon it, a small, almost hidden spring, its water bubbling up clear and cool from between two large rocks. It was a small victory, but in her desolate world, it felt like a monumental triumph, a sign from God himself. She began to clean the derelict house, a task of Herculean proportions. She swept away years of accumulated dust and debris, her arms aching. She patched the gaping holes in the roof with a mixture of mud and straw, her hands quickly becoming raw and blistered. It was slow, grueling, backbreaking work, but with each section of roof patched, with each square foot of floor swept clean, a tiny, corresponding piece of her own shattered spirit began to mend. One afternoon, while clearing out an old, dilapidated shed that leaned precariously to one side, she discovered a forgotten sack of corn seeds. They were old and dry, but when she split one open with her thumbnail, the kernel inside still looked viable. A crazy, audacious idea sparked in her mind. What if she could plant them? What if they could grow their own food right here in this wasteland? She knew next to nothing about farming on this scale, in this unforgiving climate. Her previous life had been in a small village with fertile soil, not on a desolate, sun-baked ranch. But her grandmother's journal became her Bible. Paloma spent hours every evening by the light of a small, smoky fire, poring over its pages, deciphering the faded instructions, learning about the cycles of the moon, the best time to plant, the secrets of the soil, how to read the clouds for signs of rain. She began to clear a small patch of land near the spring, an agonizing process of pulling out stubborn, thorny weeds and breaking up the hard, unyielding, sun-baked earth with a single rusty shovel she had found in the shed. It was agonizingly slow work. Her body ached in places she didn't know existed. There were days when the sheer scale of the task overwhelmed her, when she wanted to throw the shovel down, collapse into the dust, and simply give up. But then she would look over and see Itzel, her daughter's hopeful brown eyes watching her every move, and she would find the strength to lift the shovel and strike the earth one more time. One sweltering afternoon, as she struggled to loosen a particularly stubborn patch of soil, a gentle, melodic voice startled her. "Need a hand, little sister." Paloma looked up, shielding her eyes from the glare, to see an old woman standing at the edge of her makeshift field. Her face was a beautiful roadmap of wrinkles, each line telling a story, and her eyes were kind and knowing. She carried a basket filled with fragrant herbs. It was Remedios, the curandera from the nearest pueblo, a day's walk away. Remedios was a wise woman, known throughout the region for her healing hands and her even wiser words. Remedios didn't ask questions. She didn't offer pity. She simply knelt beside Paloma, her ancient hands surprisingly strong and deft, and began to help her turn the soil. She taught Paloma how to feel the earth, not just as dirt but as a living entity. She showed her how to listen to its whispers, how to understand its needs, how to coax life from its depths. She shared her vast knowledge of medicinal plants, of the rhythms of nature, and of the incredible, stubborn resilience of the human spirit. Under Remedios' patient guidance, Paloma's hands, once soft and now blistered, slowly became strong, calloused, and capable. She learned to mend fences with wire and found wood, to build a rudimentary but functional chicken coop, to care for the few scrawny but precious chickens Remedios gifted her. She learned to make her own tortillas from the corn she was now cultivating, the scent of them toasting on a flat stone filling the small house with a comforting, life-affirming warmth. Her first real, undeniable success came weeks later, when the corn seedlings, delicate, vibrant green shoots, finally pushed their way through the dark earth. Paloma knelt among them, tears of exhaustion, relief, and a quiet, profound joy streaming down her face. It was a tangible sign, irrefutable proof that she could do this. She could survive. More than that, she could rebuild. Months turned into a year, then two. The ranch, once a bleak symbol of her abandonment and despair, was slowly, painstakingly transforming. The adobe house, though still rustic and simple, was now a home, filled with the scent of drying herbs, baking bread, and the laughter of a child who was slowly learning to feel safe again. The fields, once barren and cracked, now yielded a small but steady harvest of corn, beans, and squash. The chickens provided eggs, and a small goat, another gift from a neighboring family who had heard of her plight, provided milk. One sweltering afternoon, as Paloma was mending a fence near the edge of her property, she heard the sound of a child's laughter, clear and bright. She looked up to see Itzel playing near the stream with a boy, a few years older than her. Standing nearby, watching them with a gentle, patient smile, was a man. He was tall, with kind, dark eyes and a quiet, solid strength about him. He was Emiliano, a neighboring farmer, a man who had recently moved to the area after losing his own wife and young son in a tragic flash flood. Emiliano was a man of few words, his grief having wrapped him in a cloak of quiet introspection, but his actions spoke volumes. He would often pass by on his horse, and without making a fuss, He'd offer a helping hand with a heavy load, or share a new technique for irrigating the thirsty land, or simply sit on her small porch, sharing a quiet moment as the sun set, the silence between them comfortable and deep. He never pushed, never pried into the raw wounds of her past. He simply offered his presence, a steady, comforting anchor in her often turbulent world. Itzel, who had been cautious and shy with strangers ever since her father had so violently disappeared from her life, had taken to Emiliano almost immediately. He treated her not as a broken thing to be pitied, but with respect and genuine kindness, listening patiently to her endless stories, teaching her how to identify different birds by their calls, and showing her how to whittle small figures from scraps of wood. Paloma watched their bond grow, a warmth spreading through her chest that she hadn't felt in years, a feeling she had thought long dead. One evening, after a long, shared day of working side by side, repairing a stubborn irrigation ditch that watered both their properties, they sat on the porch, sharing a simple meal of tortillas, beans, and fresh goat cheese. The air was cool and fragrant, filled with the intoxicating scent of night-blooming jasmine. Itzel was already asleep inside, tired out from a day of play. Emiliano finally spoke, his voice soft, a low rumble that was a balm to her weary soul. "You've done remarkable things here, Paloma. This place, it's a testament to your strength." Paloma looked out at the moonlit fields, the rows of corn standing like silent sentinels, a quiet pride swelling within her. "It was a struggle, Emiliano, every single day. Many times I thought I would break." He reached out, his calloused, sun-browned hand gently covering hers where it rested on the wooden bench. His touch was warm and firm. "But you didn't, you bent, but you did not break. You are a force, Paloma, a true queen of this land." Her gaze met his, and in the depths of his dark eyes, she saw no pity, but a profound admiration, a deep respect and something more, something tender and hopeful that made her heart skip a beat. A silent, powerful understanding passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, shared resilience, and a burgeoning, shared hope. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and his lips, soft and hesitant, met hers. It was not a kiss of fiery passion, but one born of shared struggle, of quiet companionship, of a connection that had grown as organically and surely as the corn in the fields. It was a promise of a future, not of rescue, but of partnership. The little farm, once a symbol of Paloma's despair, was now a vibrant, bustling hub of activity. Her corn and beans, grown with care, dedication, and the wisdom of her grandmother, were of exceptional quality. Remedios had helped her discover old family recipes for herbal remedies, poultices, and natural dyes made from local plants, which Paloma began to produce in small, careful batches. Emiliano, with his quiet, practical knowledge of local markets and trade, helped her sell her goods in the nearby towns. What had started as a desperate, frantic attempt at survival had blossomed, against all odds, into a thriving small business. Paloma's products, which she labeled Paloma's Harvest, became known throughout the region for their purity and quality. She even developed a popular line of natural soaps, using herbs from her own garden and milk from her small herd of goats. But Paloma's vision, nurtured by her own painful experience, extended beyond her own farm. She remembered with visceral clarity the crushing loneliness, the soul-destroying desperation she had felt when she was abandoned. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that there were other women in the nearby pueblos and isolated ranches, struggling silently, feeling isolated, trapped, and voiceless. She began to invite them to her farm, one by one. She taught them her methods, sharing her knowledge of sustainable farming, of creating value-added products, of natural remedies. Soon, a small collective formed, which they named Mujeres de la Tierra, Women of the Earth. They worked together, pooling resources, sharing labor, and most importantly, supporting each other emotionally. Paloma helped them find markets for their own produce and crafts. She taught them how to manage their small incomes, how to save, how to invest, how to stand on their own 2 feet with dignity and pride. The local community, initially skeptical, began to take notice. The newspaper from the nearest city, El Heraldo del Campo, ran a feature story about Paloma and the Mujeres de la Tierra, praising their resilience, their ingenuity, and their innovative approach to community building. The article called Paloma La Reina del Campo, the Queen of the Fields, a title that made her blush but also filled her with a quiet, profound satisfaction. One sunny afternoon, the entire community gathered at her farm for a special celebration. It was a harvest festival, but it was also a celebration of their collective strength and success. There was music from a local mariachi band, dancing, and the delicious aroma of traditional foods filled the air. Women from the collective proudly displayed their goods at small stalls, brightly woven textiles, rich-tasting honey, potent herbal medicines, and beautiful, rustic pottery. Their faces, once etched with worry, were now beaming with newfound confidence and purpose. Paloma stood among them, her heart overflowing with a gratitude and pride so immense it felt like it might burst. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader, a mentor, a beacon of hope. Years had passed. The farm flourished, the collective grew stronger and more influential, and Paloma's life with Emiliano and Itzel was a rich tapestry woven with love, hard work, and quiet, everyday joy. Itzel, now a bright, articulate, and confident young woman, was preparing to go to the university in the city to study business, her tuition paid for by a scholarship fund the collective had established. One sweltering afternoon, as a storm brewed on the horizon, casting an ominous, bruised shadow over the green fields, a battered, dusty truck, coughing and sputtering, pulled up to the edge of Paloma's property. Her heart, which had long since healed from the deep wounds Osvaldo had inflicted, gave a small, involuntary lurch, a muscle memory of old pain. A man emerged from the truck. His clothes were tattered and stained, his face was gaunt and sallow, and his body was etched with the bitter lines of defeat. It was Osvaldo. He had aged 20 years in 10. His once arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a defeated, shuffling slump. He looked like a hollowed-out shadow of the man he once was, a man consumed and then spat out by his own greed and emptiness. He stood there hesitant, his eyes sweeping over the thriving farm, the well-maintained house with its flowering vines, the vibrant, productive fields. He saw the prosperity, the community, the rich life that had blossomed from the very ashes he had left behind. Paloma, who had been tying up tomato plants in the garden, slowly straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. Her posture was regal, her gaze steady and clear. She felt no anger, no bitterness, only a quiet, sad sense of detachment. He was a ghost from a distant past, a tangible reminder of a painful but necessary lesson learned. He shuffled closer, his voice hoarse and cracked. Paloma, I heard about this place, about what you've done. His eyes darted around nervously, unable to meet hers. I lost everything. The woman, she left me, took every last centavo. I have nowhere to go. Paloma looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not the cruel, swaggering betrayer of her memory, but a broken, pathetic man. The primal urge for vengeance, if it had ever truly existed, had long since faded, replaced by a quiet, unshakable understanding of her own strength and worth. "This is my home, Osvaldo," she said, her voice calm and clear, without a single trace of the tremor that had once plagued it. "And this is my daughter's home. There is nothing for you here." He flinched, as if she had struck him. "But I thought maybe for old time's sake." Paloma shook her head, a gentle but firm and final gesture. "The past is buried, Osvaldo. We have built our lives on new ground. And what we have built here, it is not for those who seek to destroy." She paused, her gaze unwavering, meeting his for the first time. "I wish you peace, Osvaldo, I truly do, but your path is not here." He stood for a moment longer, a defeated, solitary figure against the vibrant backdrop of her triumph, then turned and slowly walked back to his battered truck. He drove away, the cloud of dust he left behind a stark, gray contrast to the vibrant, green life that now thrived on Paloma's land. She watched him go until he was a speck on the horizon. Then she turned back to her garden, a quiet sense of final, profound closure settling over her like a comforting shawl. The storm on the horizon broke, but it brought only cleansing, life-giving rain. The air was thick with the sweet, pungent scent of marigolds and roasted corn. The lively, passionate sounds of mariachi music filled the valley, mingling with the joyous laughter of children running through the fields. Itzel, radiant and beautiful in a simple white dress, stood beside Emiliano, her hand in his, as the entire community gathered for their wedding. The ceremony took place in the very heart of Paloma's transformed farm, under a large, ancient mesquite tree, its branches hung with twinkling lights. Paloma watched them, her heart swelling with a happiness so profound, so pure, it brought tears to her eyes. Emiliano, her steadfast partner, her quiet rock, had become a beloved and respected father figure to Itzel. And Itzel, her smart, compassionate, resilient daughter, was embarking on a new chapter of her own, armed with the strength and wisdom she had absorbed from her mother's incredible journey. Paloma was no longer just the queen of the fields. She was the matriarch, the heart of the community. The Mujeres de la Tierra collective had grown exponentially, empowering countless women throughout the region to reclaim their lives, to find their own voices, to build their own futures. Paloma spent her days mentoring young women, teaching them not just about farming and business, but about resilience, self-worth, and the sacred, unbreakable power of sisterhood. One evening, long after the wedding, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery, breathtaking hues, Paloma sat on the porch with Itzel. Itzel, now a young married woman on the cusp of her own life, turned to her mother, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and a deep, lingering curiosity. "Mom," Itzel began, her voice soft, "I've never really asked. Why did he do it? Why did Dad really leave us?" Paloma looked at her daughter, her gaze filled with a lifetime of wisdom and unconditional love. She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that reached her eyes. "My precious Itzel," she began, her voice calm and steady as a river. "Your father left us because he was looking for something he thought was out there, something he believed was more valuable than what he already possessed. He was chasing a ghost, a fantasy of wealth and ease." She paused, taking her daughter's hand in her own. "He left us because he was blind. He couldn't see the true treasure that was right here in our home, in our hearts, in this very land that we nurtured back to life." Itzel's brow furrowed slightly. "But didn't it hurt? Weren't you devastated? Didn't you feel abandoned?" Paloma squeezed her daughter's hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Oh, Mija, it hurt more than words can ever say. For a time, I felt lost, broken, like a piece of my soul had been ripped away. But that pain, my love, that terrible, gaping wound, it became the soil. It became the fertile ground from which something new, something stronger, something infinitely more beautiful began to grow." She gestured out to the sprawling, prosperous farm, to the lights of the neighboring homes belonging to other women from the collective, to the vibrant community that surrounded them. "He left us in a desolate place, thinking he was leaving us with nothing, condemning us to a slow death. But what he didn't understand, what he could never understand, was that he left us with everything we truly needed. The earth beneath our feet, the strength in our hands, and the love between each other. He left us with the opportunity, the chance to build something true, something real, something that could never be stolen or gambled away." Itzel's eyes widened, a dawning, profound understanding illuminating their depths. "So, he didn't leave us because we weren't enough. He left because he wasn't enough for what we were destined to become." Paloma nodded slowly, her heart swelling with a fierce pride for the wise young woman her daughter had become. "Precisely, my love, precisely. His leaving was never a reflection of your worth or of my worth. It was simply the catalyst for our comeback. It was the harsh winter that forced our roots to grow deeper. It was the moment we were forced to realize that we had the power within us all along to create our own abundance, our own joy, our own beautiful, meaningful life, without needing anyone else to validate it or give us permission. She looked out at the fields, now bathed in the soft, silvery glow of twilight. And that, my sweet girl, is the shocking, wonderful truth of it all. Sometimes the greatest, most painful loss can lead to the greatest, most unexpected gain. Sometimes being abandoned is the very thing that sets you free to find your true, unshakable strength, to build your own empire from the dust, and to become the queen of your own story. Itzel leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, a profound sense of peace and understanding settling over her. So, his leaving in the end, it was a gift. Paloma chuckled softly, a warm, rich sound that floated on the evening air. Not at first, Mija, definitely not at first, but in the end, yes, in the end it was the start of everything. The last sliver of the sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to pepper the vast, velvet expanse of the Mexican sky. Each one seemed like a tiny beacon of hope, a glittering testament to the enduring, indomitable power of a woman's spirit, and the beautiful, abundant life she had cultivated from the bitter seeds of abandonment. The legacy of Paloma, the comeback queen, would live on, not just in her thriving farm or the collective she had built, but in the hearts and hands of every woman she had helped to rise.